Hello, and welcome to another episode of R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm your host, Valerie King, R&R's editor-in-chief, and I'm joined today by Doug Hoffman, who is CEO of the National Organization of Remediators and Mold Inspectors, which is commonly known as NORMI. NORMI is a not-for-profit training and certifying organization for mold and indoor air quality professionals, and its courses and certifications are recognized and approved by all of the states that license mold professionals. So there's a lot that's new with Normie. And for that reason, we invited Doug on to talk about recent and upcoming initiatives. And of course, his expert perspective on indoor air quality and mold remediation in general. Thank you so much for joining me, Doug.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about being able to share the information. We've got a lot of stuff going on, as you said. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Preparing for this interview, I was like, wow, that and that and that and that. I'm sure there's more, but it'll be cool to dive in. So before we do get into what's new and notable with Normie these days, what is Normie for those who aren't familiar? If you could talk a little bit about its history and its mission.
Yes, thank you very much. So in July of 2004, actually July 4th of 2004, we started Normie, and Normie was designed for really with two goals in mind, to be an education source for the public and an education source for the people who work for the public. So that kind of twofold mission has been what prompted us to initially get certified with the state of Louisiana to do training on their licensing law, which was the first mold licensing law in the country. And so we got approved as a training provider. And what was interesting about that, Valerie, probably the thing that was the uh, what really put us on the forefront was, as you recall, just a year after that, Katrina hit, and we were doing training and free seminars for the public. And I tell people, it's often interesting, when we were doing training on the mold remediation licensing law, half of the classroom would be filled with homeowners who just wanted the information. And so we were able to do some television, of course, and some media, and it gave us an opportunity to really be, I think, in front of a lot of what could have been potentially really bad situations for folks, helping them with the right kind of protocols and so forth. So one of the things that we've tried to do from the very beginning is to support these guys as entrepreneurs. In a lot of ways, we think about that as kind of our beginning being the Independence Day for those guys who were able to then create a really successful business. So that, of course, is our tagline, not just about getting a license or a certification, it's about how to build a successful business. So pretty big information, a pretty big goal, I think, and mission, but we want to provide information that will help these guys be successful and then help the public get the right information that they need.
Thanks for that. It does amaze me the timing of Normie's launch and then Hurricane Katrina happening right after it. Really, I mean, I'm sure it was a good thing that you had established yourself just in time to be that resource after such in time for such a tragic and massive,
It,
moment in
it really
history.
it really was. And I'll tell you what's interesting about those kinds of things. What happened to Katrina happens oftentimes when there's a big disaster, is they oftentimes will suspend all of the licensing laws. And so you end up with people from all over the country, which is great, faith-based organizations and so forth, wanting to help. But the important goal for the city, of course, is to get the tax base back up. And so the work is not always done as well as it should be done. Sometimes uh, it's not as safe sometimes. And so one of the things that we were able to do, I think, was help folks, kind of guide them through that process of making sure that they were filling and fulfilling the right kind of protocols.
Very good. So more on Normie and how it serves the industry, who it serves. You talked a little bit about it, but could you dive deeper into your membership, who those individuals are, kind of those profiles, and more examples of how you serve them?
Yes, thank you. It's a interesting thing with us because we come from the construction industry. That's really my background rather than the water restoration side. We have a lot of contractors who come to us and want to be trained. They're not necessarily in the water restoration side, but they actually want to know how to do the work because sometimes they're exempt in some situations or there's not any licensing to guide them when work is done. We do a lot of work with facilities maintenance directors, guys who, again, are not necessarily licensed. We just came back from San Diego and did a training for the U.S. Marine Corps. Those guys outsource almost all of their work, but they want to know how to do it correctly. So it's kind of interesting how it's evolved that not only are we working with entrepreneurs and trying to support them and give them the training that they need, continuing education credits and so forth that they need, how to run their business, but then also just for people who just want the information. They don't need to be licensed, they don't need to be certified, but they're maybe overseeing the work. So it's kind of a interesting mission in that way. They all need the same kind of information, but they need it for different reasons.
Very intriguing. Yeah, I didn't realize until diving into the website, which, by the way, listeners and viewers, is quite comprehensive if you want to learn more about Normie. But yeah, I didn't realize the extent of your reach and the different stakeholders you serve. So I'm now excited to dive into what is new with Normie now that the stage has been set. Um, we're recording this in late December 2021, and that means the Normie CE conference just concluded. Very cool. So
Yes.
how was that, and could you share some highlights with us?
Yeah, it was so exciting because this is only the second time we've actually done a CE conference, and CE, of course, is continuing education. And a lot of people don't know that Normie provides a whole host of continuing education credits for a lot of different organizations. Some of our listeners are probably very familiar with IICRC. Many of our classes are approved by them for continuing education. Of course, our members require continuing education to keep their certifications up, and some of the states require continuing education. So we decided to put together a conference where we offered 6 classes during that 4-day period. And anyone who came to that class could get their continuing education credits that they needed for their whatever situation they needed them for, either for a state, for an organization, or even for their Normie credits. So it was really fun. We did it at the beach. Great place to be, right? This time of the year. At the Bilmar Beach Resort in Treasure Island, beautiful facility, and just had a great time in the evenings with networking and all kinds of things going on that was really, really kind of fun. So it's only the second time we did it, but we're looking forward to planning it again next year. There's a renewal cycle with some of the states, and this fits in with their guidelines to make sure that these guys get the continuing education credits they need for renewal of their licensure.
Okay, okay. So more big news, Normie recently located the Normie Pro Academy. What is the Normie Pro Academy for those of us who aren't familiar? Where did it move to, and how's that going?
Well, you'll love this, Valerie. We actually opened the Normie Pro Academy, which was an on-site training facility in June of 2020 in the middle of
Oh
COVID.
gosh. Of course.
And so, yeah, of course. And so what we were doing was we were doing training. Much of it was on Zoom, and we wanted to have a place where we could actually provide training both on site for those who were comfortable coming to an on-site setting and live online. So I think we're one of the first, maybe we're the only organization now that does actually simulcast training where we teach on site and then at the same time, we broadcast it live online through Zoom. And so we needed a bigger place. It worked out well for the first year, but then we needed something that was a little bit larger. So we actually moved to a new location in Sunrise where it's about 3 times as large as our previous location. And the cool thing about this academy is that it not only gives us the room that we need, but the cool thing is that we are able to create essentially a live studio in this setting. So when guys come to a class, whether it's live online or they take it on site, they actually feel like they're in the classroom. We have a big television with a gallery view. If somebody has a question, they can raise their hand, or the teacher can sometimes tell what's going on and say, hey, you look a little quizzical. Do you have a question? So it's a really great opportunity to provide training in, I think, a couple of different formats. And this is new to the industry, but those people who feel like they need to stay home or can't afford to travel, it really, really has worked out well. So that's our new Normie Pro Academy.
Very cool. Yeah, I realize a lot of work goes into an operation just from the production side of making something like that work. So impressive things being done to make that simulcast possible, and neat that the space is 3 times bigger. Very cool.
Yeah, very
S-
comfortable. We're looking forward to expanding this next year. We're
Okay,
going to be doing classes virtually every week there. So a lot of different types of classes, which is really cool.
very neat. Speaking of classes, I hear you're offering a new class in January of 2022, and it's related to FEMA, and it may be related to what you kind of talked about earlier with licensing, because I know we chatted about this in the past a little bit. What
Yeah.
is the focus of this class? Who's it for? What's the backstory for those of us who haven't heard about it yet?
Yeah, this is a brand new class. We've decided, of course, with our desire to give guys what they need just from running a business standpoint, we're going to be offering this year some OSHA classes and some EPA classes, of course, the lead RRP class. But this particular class is a class that has been developed with in conjunction the FEMA with the EPA. So here's the backstory. When there's a disaster that happens, whether it's a flood or a hurricane or tornado, as I said, oftentimes the licensing laws are suspended. A lot of people come in from all over the place, which is wonderful to help faith-based organizations. I mean, what could we do without them? They're phenomenal. But those guys aren't trained. Oftentimes they're just volunteers. And so what FEMA and EPA joined together to do was to create a class for disaster workers, guys who will go into these places and they'll know exactly how to work and be safe. We have a couple of documents on our website specifically to that, but now FEMA has stepped up and they've said we want to train these guys and we want them to have an ID so that when they go into a disaster area, they can show that they've been trained on pathogens and safety, OSHA safety, and so forth. So it's a 15-hour course. Typically, it's 3 5-hour days, which is kind of tough to fit into your schedule. So we've worked with the trainer and with FEMA and redeveloped that course to just a 2-day course so that they can be out of their office for just 2 days instead of 3. And we're really excited about offering it. We're going to be offering it at the Normie Pro Academy next month in January. And I have a feeling that we're going to be doing it every couple of months. And you want to know the best thing of all?
Yes, please. Let us know.
We're going to offer it for free.
Wow,
We
that's
have,
huge.
yeah, we have a nonprofit organization who is funding this and backing this. And so we're going to be able to offer it to Normie members, those who are active Normie members. They're going to be able to take this course for free.
That's a big deal. Wow. Cool. I did not realize that part. Cool.
I
Okay.
know.
Nice. Okay.
all,
Keeping,
all
go
kinds
ahead.
of things, all kinds of things to learn, huh?
Really, really. Yes. So, keeping with the topic of classes,
Mhm.
you are offering free classes, more free classes with Florida continuing education credits through March 2022, I read. What's
Yes.
that about? Can you elaborate?
Absolutely. So I was a part of a board several years ago before Normie started. And one of the things that frustrated me about that trade association, I won't mention it, but one of the things that frustrated me about that was that people paid a lot of money, sometimes several $100s a year, and really never got much out of it.
Mm.
So what we did when we formed Normie was we decided that we were going to give our guys continuing education every single week for free if they were active members. And so every Tuesday night they can come into our Zoom platform, and we can do interviews just like this, or we can do book reviews. We can do training, a lot of different things we can do, talk about new technologies. And we've been doing that every week,
That's quite a
except for,
commitment. Wow.
yeah, except for holidays, of course, but we've been doing that every week since 2004. Well, what we decided to do last year was we thought, well, with our Normie members, they're paying a fee every month. Maybe we can provide live online training that we've gotten approved for some of the states. Maybe we can offer that for free. and just include it as part of their active membership. So that's what we're doing. They can come in, they need to have, in the state of Florida, for instance, 14 hours of continuing education every 2 years. And so we decided, look, if you become an active member, it's only $18 a month. I think it might be going to 19 next month. But if you pay that flat fee per month, then we can provide for you free training online. You can get the hours that you need, and you don't have to go anywhere, rent a hotel, take off of work, So that's what we're doing. Free continuing education credits for our Normie members.
Nice. The convenience theme continues, and
Yes, it
the
does.
ROI theme, I would say.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And truthfully, it's very, very expensive. And of course, now with gas going up, it's very expensive to travel. And if you've got to travel some way, be away from your office, spend a couple of days in a hotel, spend money to eat, if we can save them that money by them being an active member, and we can give them this benefit, it just makes sense.
Okay. All right. So that concludes my list of specific questions tied to new and notable. But is there anything we haven't covered off on yet you want to highlight that restoration and remediation pros ought to know about Normie that's new or notable?
Yes, I think a couple of things that would be really interesting is that we have a lot of strategic alliances that we've um, been able to put together, where I think we're benefiting the industry and benefiting the Normie membership. We have some large franchisors that are now asking us to come in and do training for their franchisees, and we're glad to do that. One of the things that's nice about Normie, Valerie, is that we're not a 747 flying around and having to navigate the air. We're like a Piper Cub. We can turn and twist and change things. We can take our curriculum and make it fit that business model for that franchisor. And so we've been doing a lot of that over the last couple of years. Just like with the U.S. Marine Corps, we were able to design a program that was specifically for them and didn't disrupt their business model. I think that's huge. And the other thing that we're able to do, which I'm very excited about, is we've got a large presence, as you know, at several of the conferences that go on, ISSA, the Experience, and we're really trying hard to encourage our guys to participate in those things, because that just keeps them connected to the industry. And as we know, you've got to be connected to the industry, and being connected with us because of our contact with the legislation, and I think our contact with just the very large players in the industry. I think we're able to give our guys something that they might not be able to get anywhere else. Certainly wouldn't get if they were disconnected.
Very helpful. Yeah, I definitely recognized your presence at the experience at the 2021 experience in September, from show floor demos to, of course, an expansive booth, and then a number of sessions, some of which I had the chance to attend. So yeah, that really does I remember that, and that was my first show. So yeah, Normie's presence was not hidden at all. It was quite measurable and quite impactful.
Well, I have one more, if I could mention this, that I think you'll find
Please.
really, really exciting. And we wanted to get a piece of our equipment into the convention center in Las Vegas, but we couldn't get it through the door.
Oh gosh. Oh gosh.
so so we're looking at Cincinnati and a couple of other places, but I just want to tell you that I'm so excited about this, because for years we've wanted to be a part of the disaster recovery efforts, not to do the work, as I said, but to do free seminars and to give out information. So in July of this year, we purchased a 40-foot Class A motor coach, and we're going to be able to take it through our other nonprofit, which is the Normie Environmental Task Force. That's the 501(c), and we've gotten a lot of contributions for water, hand sanitizer, that sort of thing. But what we want to do is we want to be able to go into those disaster areas with a Normie presence to promote our members to those local folks. And again,
Interesting.
we don't do the work, but we're going to be up there setting up a booth, handing out some things, of course, that folks have given us to be able to hand out, but primarily to be an information source. A lot of times in those situations, Valerie, people don't even know the right questions to ask. How do I deal with my insurance? What should I have an adjuster? How do I deal with the licensing law? Does it really matter? What kind of protocol should I use? Should I use bleach or not use bleach? All of those things that we feel like we can have a presence, but you can't do that and be a drain on the locale. What you have to do is you have to have a sustainable operation. And so we just purchased this vehicle, which will have a command center, Wi-Fi capability, internet, so folks can charge their phones and maybe email their friends and let them know they're okay.
Wow.
I'm so excited about this. And like I said, one of these times we're going to be able to get it into the convention center.
That is so cool. I didn't know about that. That's such a creative way to really ingrain yourself in the communities that are hit by these experiences, from the people, from the property owners themselves to those serving them. And
Yeah.
wow, yeah, an information resource. I can charge my phone. Yeah, that's really neat.
So
Wow.
can I tell you, can I tell you the fun part about that? You know,
Yes.
if you have a bus, it has to be a named, and it has to have a female name, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So we call it Norma.
Oh, that's awesome. That's perfect, Norma. I look
Yeah,
forward to seeing it in the near future. I hope
absolutely.
at one or many more of the future shows. It fits in the door. It fits. They
Yeah,
have that.
that's right.
Cool.
We'll still work on that.
Yes, yes. Okay, so before we go, I definitely wanted to ask you a few things about, IAQ, indoor air quality in general. Get the scoop on your expertise, high level. So first off, I understand that Normie thinks beyond mold. My first inclination is always mold with Normie, but it's more than that. Really, any indoor air contaminant. I understand. So
It is.
beyond mold, what are some other examples of contaminants listeners should just be thinking about in the work they do as restorers and remediators, maybe?
Yes, well, we deal with things besides mold because mold is oftentimes, and we do training on this concept, mold can be used as a surrogate or standing in the place of other contaminants that are in the environment. If you remove mold spores, you're typically using an air scrubber, AFD. That air scrubber is going to take everything out above 3.3 microns. And so it's not going to say, hey, let's take the mold spores out and leave everything else in the air. So when you do sanitization protocols for mold, you're really taking care of a lot of other things that are in the environment. And those contaminants are the things that are typically allergens for folks. Um, Mice, feces, dust mites, pollen, all of those sorts of things that are floating around in the air that are contaminants, whether it's on the air or on a surface somewhere. We want our guys to understand that the protocols that they're utilizing is really sanitizing both, sanitizing the air and the surfaces. So when I started in the indoor air quality industry back in the 90s, mid 90s, I've told folks that for 35 years I built unhealthy houses, so I'm spending the rest of my life fixing that. But but I think what we are able to do, and we train our guys in thinking this way, is it's not just about mold. Don't go in and just take a couple of samples and send them to a lab and think that you've understood what's going on in that environment. Become an indoor air quality assessor. Uh, Develop an indoor air quality IAQ profile of that environment, and that takes more comprehensive testing, different types of equipment, and in some cases better equipment, but find out what's going on in that environment. And then what you know is when you are removing the contaminants from the environment, however you do that with the protocols that you're using, what you're doing is you're creating a safer, healthier, cleaner environment. And I think that's really incredibly important for uh, the public to understand about the Normie approach, and it's important for the professionals to understand that we approach this not just from a mold standpoint, but from a microbial standpoint. And we just completed our board meeting last week. I'm going to give you some information. You get the news flash. Uh,
Thanks.
but we just completed our board meeting last week, and we are going to start using another designation for NORMI, the National Organization of Remediators and Microbial Inspectors, because we do have a
Ah,
broader view of this industry.
wow, that's a big deal.
It is a big
Nice.
deal. Yeah.
Nice.
But I think it more fits with our mission and fits more with what our guys are actually doing in the field. When they're trained by us, they're not just looking at mold. They're looking at the two things that we tell them is have a broader view of the environment and indoor environment. And secondly, don't just fix the problem, but create an environment where that problem won't come back.
Very good. Okay, so back to mold now, but still speaking about the broader landscape, at least in the US right now. I don't have a full understanding, which I should. What does that look like? You talked about how Normie offers, certifications for all the states that do require it for mold remediation. So if I'm a mold remediator, where is certification or licensure required? Where isn't it? I guess also, what is Normie's stance on that? Do you believe that the country should have requirements everywhere or not? So just your take on the
Yeah,
landscape
thank you.
there.
I'm really glad you asked me that because being a contractor for 35 years, I battled with unlicensed contracting for years. And so even though I understand the freedom of a business being able to do what they need to do to be profitable, because I've been an entrepreneur for 35 years as well in my industry, in my construction business. But the point is that there needs to be regulations, there needs to be guidelines, because this particular side of the industry is just fraught with all kinds of fraud. And I think it's really, really important. You don't have to do very much of a search on YouTube to find videos where people were scammed about some problem with an indoor air quality issue or specifically a mold issue. So back in 2006, we actually sent a written legislation, the proposed legislation, to all of the governors throughout the United States. And we said, if you have anybody in the legislation that feels that this is kind of a hot button for them, that they want to write legislation, we want to help in the process if we can. And it wasn't just so that we could control the industry. It was because we know that when legislation is written, whenever it's written, the guys that are writing it for the most part are lawyers. And what they need is they need stakeholders like Normie that are in the field actually doing the work. And it's kind of like the difference between writing a book on how you should drive a bus and then actually getting in that sucker and trying to drive it. And so they need stakeholders like us that are in the field to be able to say, well, this works, this doesn't work. So we've had quite an impact, I think. We're stakeholder in Florida licensing law, DC licensing law, and in New York. We're working with some other states now that are looking at licensing. And so here's my take on it. Here's the answer to your question. If there's really good legislation to be written, we want to be a part of that, and we want to help make sure that it helps and doesn't hurt the industry and the public. And so if we can be a part of that, we think that we have something to offer.
Very helpful. And right now, that means those requirements don't exist in every state, to be clear. That is not
Correct.
across the board right now.
Correct. There are only 5 states: Louisiana, Texas, Florida, District of Columbia, which I know is not a state, and New York. But Portland, Oregon now has a licensing requirement, and we have been approved as a training provider there. But I think what's really important, and I think you'll like this take, what we've learned is oftentimes when we do a class, we'll have maybe a third of the class will people who are coming in from other places in the country, California, Washington, Minneapolis, and they don't need licensing. That's not what they're coming for. They're coming for the credibility of the Normie certification. And I mean, they tell that to us. They say, look, I'm working in a state that doesn't have any licensing. We need the credibility of a certification to set us apart from the guys out there that were trained by a, 3-ring binder. So the point is, in fact, I tell this story, Valerie, when we started in 2004, one of my board members actually purchased a self-study course. He paid $450 to become a certified mold remediator. And in the mail, he got a 3-ring binder with his certificate.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's concerning.
So to be able to offer that kind of credibility and being recognized by the states, which is really where we get our credibility, being recognized by the states that we are a credible organization and going to benefit the public and also benefit the industry. I think that's huge.
Okay. More on mold. I'm curious if there's like a common question or misconception you experience at Normie when you deal with restoration and remediation contractors in general, however high level or technical that question or misconception may be. And of course, the answer, if you could share.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that because we've dealt with the same kind of question or questions over and over again since 2004. I think what happens in any industry, and certainly I saw this in the construction industry as well, is guys get used to doing things a certain way, and when techniques change, when products change, when services change, they don't always move with those changes, and so they end up doing things the way they've always done them. And so, for instance, one of the big questions we get is about the value of encapsulates. And encapsulates, as you probably recall, is essentially a painting process where once you've taken down the drywall and you've cleaned everything, you would actually then coat it with an encapsulate. Well, the original purpose of that, and a lot of guys still do that, the original purpose of that was so that as an assessor, I could go in and I could say, well, yeah, I see where they did the work because it's all white, you know. But what we've learned through the years, and just recently, probably over the last 7 or 8 years, is those encapsulates, especially if they're the typical kind of encapsulates that are used, will oftentimes seal the wood, seal the substrates. And as we know, and I know this from a construction background standpoint, wood has to breathe and it has to actually allow the moisture to come out of it because it's almost always got some moisture content in it. And so when you seal that up, what you're doing is you're locking that moisture on in the inside, and you may not have a problem right away, but within a few years, it could easily rot from the inside out. So those kinds of things, I mean, that's just one example, but those kinds of things, that kind of information where kind of brought over from years and years of experience, they need to understand that things have changed. There's more science now than there's ever been on what we do. And there's going to be more. And so again, staying connected to the industry and staying connected to events where you can learn about that kind of thing, I think is incredibly important.
Thank you. Similarly, is there a common misconception or misstep you see made thinking beyond mold, as we talked about, microbial, like with other contaminants, other indoor contaminants that, contractors may struggle with or not understand or ask you about often?
Yes, yeah, I think so. I think there's a common misconception that if you can't see it, it's not a problem.
Uh,
I think if there's anything that we've learned from COVID, uh, that you don't have to see what that contaminant is for it to have a devastating effect on you. You know, we also do training years ago, and we've still got some training on our site about drinking water. Interesting parallel with indoor air quality issues. But you know, you look at a glass of water, and it may be filled with arsenic or chlorine or other kinds of things that's going to hurt you, and yet you look at it and you think, yes, I can't see anything. It looked good to me. Well, it's very, very similar with the indoor air quality issues. And I think what we've learned is that there are ways to test to make sure that there are not going to be any issues left for those folks who are especially sensitive to the problems. But the point is that it's so important that we do a good, thorough job and use objective testing to prove that what we did actually worked.
Very helpful. Speaking of that, that brings me to the experience again and an assessment, which you talked about both of those a little bit earlier. And that's something you assessing indoor air quality is something you particularly presented on. I attended that session at the 2021 Experience Convention and Trade Show. And you actually already did an interview with us specifically about that, but I love to revisit it because I found it quite intriguing. There's this difference between remediation and assessment. They both play important roles in the work that contractors do. Can you kind of elaborate on the differences and those important roles those components play?
Sure, sure. Yeah, so one of the cool things about our industry is it's very, very clear that there has to be this separation between the assessment side and the remediation side to avoid not just the appearance, but to actually avoid any kind of conflict of interest. I always say a good remediator can find mold anywhere. You know, and so he could find all kinds of jobs that really are not needed to be done, or certainly done at the level he might want to do them. So the assessor is the one who finds the problem. The remediator is the one who fixes the problem. And I was telling somebody the other day, Valerie, I guess I could go to a plastic surgeon and say, "Hey, fix me," and he's going to figure out all kinds of things he can do to,
Ah,
you know,
that's
to
such a
work
great
on
analogy.
work on me. But I think I maybe would go to him when my wife said, "Hey, you know what? Maybe you should think about fixing this." And then I could go specifically to him and say, "Can you make me look like Tom Cruise? How do you do that?" But anyway, the point is that I think this idea of finding the problem and fixing the problem is huge. It enables the assessor to become the architect, essentially, of the project. So he's not only one that has found the issue and recommended on how to fix it, he's written the protocol. But then once the work is done by the tradesman, who is the remediator, then he can come in after the fact, post, and he's the one who can say, yes, it was done correctly. Yes, it meets our guidelines for clearance. Yes, we're going to say that we verify that the job was done correctly. And so having that split in the industry is marvelous. I really wish in some ways the construction industry was more like that, where, and now it is on oftentimes on commercial jobs where you have an architect, he designed it, I'm the builder, I go in and build it, he's going to come in afterwards and make sure it was done correctly. But you don't often see that in the construction industry. You should always see it in the mold industry. It should always be there. And even if the remediator wants to go ahead, like in a state that doesn't have any licensing, he may want to do both. But even in those situations, the homeowner should require it. And truthfully, a remediator should require it as well, just to protect themselves. Have somebody else write the protocol instead of me as the remediator. Have someone else verify that the work was done correctly. It just is the right way to do it.
All right. Last but not least, I'm excited to ask. Of course, we're embarking on a new year, 2022. So, what key trends, predictions, anything like that related to the world of mold and IAQ come to mind based on your experience and work with Normie this past year? Anything that restoration remediation contractors ought to be thinking about, in your opinion?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So one of the really exciting things about this industry and just keeps me pumped is our ability to learn more and more and more about creating cleaner, safer, and healthier environments. You think about at 72 years old, I remember one kid in my high school that had asthma. How many kids today are dealing with allergies and asthma and all of those kinds of health issues? And there's a lot of evidence that a lot of that has to do with what's been going on inside, how we're building our homes, how we're not maintaining them the way we used to. I mean, again, when I was a kid, we cleaned our house in the summer and the fall. I mean, the spring and the fall, every single year. And I mean, it wasn't just vacuuming. It was taking out everything, taking out the rugs, taking down the Venetian blinds, taking down the curtains and washing them. And we just don't live like that anymore. So in terms of trends, I think for 2022, because this is such a dynamic industry, we're going to see new devices out there. We've already started training on one from Inspirotech, the Air Answers device. We've got a PRV 24K, which is a sanitizing device that's used during the air scrubbing process when the building is under containment. There are tremendous IAQ solutions out there that are being developed every single day. So those new devices, I think, are going to be huge in 2022. The new rules that are out there, what FEMA is going to require, what the EPA is requiring and now beginning to enforce on the lead RRP program, what states are looking at. I know kind of behind the scenes, there are several states that are now looking at licensing laws one of the things that's held them up, that they've been concerned about how it might impact the industry, existing industry, but I think they're working through some of that through grandfather clauses and so forth. So new rules that are in the industry. I think one of the exciting things to me is, and it sounds kind of negative, but I think it's positive, is that we're recognizing that the sensitized individuals population is growing. And what that means is that as we recognize that and we develop classes for that, like we've done recently with our certified remediation for sensitized individuals course, one of the things that's exciting about that is that now we're going to be able to help people who previously were turned away, or they ended up with doing a remediation job 3, 4, 5, 6 times and never got it done correctly because they're so sensitive to the indoor air qualities issues that are there. And then the final thing I would mention, which I think is really big, is the development of things like real-time labs, with which we're working with, who are able now to connect through DNA testing your health issues to some specific indoor environment. That's going to be gigantic. And I don't mean just from a legal standpoint, but I mean again, from the standpoint of being able to help people live better lives indoors. And that's the passion that keeps me going, and I think keeps most of our members going, is that we know we're making a difference. And it's a big, big positive difference.
Wow. I think that is a great note to end on. This has been such an informative conversation, Doug. Thank you so much for your time and insight on everything from regulations to what Normie's up to education and advancements.
Well,
And
thank
again,
you.
insightful. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I appreciate it. All right. So before we go, one final question, and that is, where can listeners go to connect with you or learn more about Normie?
Well, we have a lot of places where they can go. Of course, we're on LinkedIn. We're at Facebook, facebook.normie.org, where we try to keep the public. And then we also have a Normie Pro support page for our members at Facebook. But our main website at normie.org has a lot of information. One of the things that's really cool about that website, I think, is we now have training tracks. We have a lot of guys that will come to us and they'll say, okay, so I took a course, now what? What do I do next? And so we have pathways that we've developed for them, so they know what classes to take. And they're not like prerequisites where, oh, you got to take this class before you take this class. They're really designed for their business model. And then, of course, our class site at events.normie.org, where we list all of our courses by certification. Valerie, we have 19 certifications. And so, as you said, it's not just about mold. It's building science courses, which are so important to guys understanding how to fix the problems. Biocide application courses, indoor air quality courses, a lot of stuff that I think will help guys in the industry. And then of course, on the public side, information for them as well. So that's where I would send them.
Very good. Solid list of resources for sure. Okay, listeners and viewers, that ends this episode of Ask the Expert. So, for more insights on restoration, remediation, and the people behind it all, of course, visit our website, randrmag.online.com, Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. And if you haven't yet, please be sure to follow our podcast so that you can keep up with all of our latest episodes as they come. And give us a quick review and rating. We're also on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. So we invite you to follow us there too. This has been R&R's Ask the Expert. Thank you for listening.